The final part of our field trip will be calculating out the river's stream flow. To calculate stream flow, we will need to take all data collected at the river and we'll put it together into stream flow, which is measured in cubic feet per second, which is looking at the volume or how much water traveling through a certain point in the river per second. So have your calculator ready. Here we go. So here's a set of sample data, starting out with 2 stream widths. So looking at those 2 pieces of data, that's not so much something we're calculating, but we've observed, we measured, and now we have those 2 numbers to put into our calculation. Width at stake 1 and width at stake 2. Second part is looking at all the depths that were recorded. So to figure out the average depth, first thing we want to do is add together all 10 depths at the location of stake 1. And of course, to get average, we divide by how many we are putting in to the problem. So if we add these up and divide by 10, that will give us average number 1. And same thing over here at stake 2. Put these all in together, add them up, and divide by 10. So go ahead, pause the video, crunch those numbers out, and see what you get for each of those 2 averages. So once you've plugged that all into the calculator and you've added it together, divided up by 10, the first depth average we should have gotten is 1.26, and that's of course measured in feet. And then over here for our second calculation, adding them up, divide by 10, has given us 1.11 feet. So those are our average depths for each of the 2 stakes. Second average to collect here is average flow rate. So again, flow rate is measuring the speed of the water. And that's the one that comes out on the LabQuest in 3 decimals. So we're going to add these all up. And again, to take the average, divide by how many we have. So add them together and divide by 5. Again, go ahead, pause the calculator as you work out those numbers. So looking at my 2 averages here, my first average flow rate is 0.4406, and my second flow rate average is 0.2792. So that's what I got straight out the calculator. But what I want to include here is with any calculation that we do for stream flow, we want to round to the 100th place. And so that means I want to go 2 places after the decimal. So looking at what I got on the calculator already, I want to round to the 100th, so just to 2 decimals. So on the left over here, 0.4406, if I look at my third number, I know 0 is going to round down. So that means I keep my 0.44 as my feet per second for flow rate. Over here on the right, for stake number 2, my third number is a 9. That, of course, is going to round up. So that means my 7 will increase to an 8, and my average over here will be 0.28 feet per second. So even though this is what I got on the calculator, I'm going to use for this calculation further 0.28. So far on the previous page, I have 3 calculations then. I have my width at both stake 1 and 2. That was a calculated, or a measured number, rather, from the field trip. Average depth, we calculated by those 10 at each stake. And flow rate, we calculated the average by the 5 at each stake. The tricky part about this formula is making sure I'm plugging in the correct number to the correct spots. So using the calculated data from page number 1, I now want to plug in first my 2 average flow rates. So that means I've got 0.44 and also 0.28. And here I'm simply doing an average, so notice I'm adding them together and dividing by 2. So 0.44 plus 0.28, and dividing that by 2, I got 0.36. And I want that to be rounded to the nearest hundredth, which it already is, so I'm good to go there. Now I'm plugging in, again, a little bit different numbers. Got my width that I'm plugging in for both stake 1 and stake 2, and also the average depth for stake 1 and stake 2. So I just want to make sure I plug in the right details. So the width at stake 1 is 15.2, and I'm going to multiply that by the depth at stake 1, which is 1.26. And again, for stake 2, my width is 17.5 multiplied by my depth of 1.11. So when plugging those in, I've got 15.2 times 1.26, and I want that to be to the hundredths. So my calculator says 19.152. So I simply would drop the 2 here. And for my second calculation, 17.5 times 1.11. I've got 19.425. And that 5 rounds up, so I would record 19.43. So for stream area at stake 1 and stake 2, I have that piece of data. Now again, making sure I plug in the right information, I'm now taking the 2 areas that I just gathered. So that is my 19.15 plus my 19.43. And I'm simply going to add those together and divide them by 2, again, just doing a quick average. So 19.15 and 19.43, adding them together and dividing by 2, making sure I'm still in that hundredths place. I get 19, oops, I did too fast. This here is my 19.25. So that's my average area of the whole 10-foot location that I was measuring in. Last but not least, to get my stream flow measurement, I'm taking that average area just calculated, 19.29, and I'm multiplying that out by my average flow rate, which was the very first thing I did on the back page, and that was 0.36. So I've got 19.29 times 0.36. Again, keeping it in the hundredths place, 6.94. That means at my spot in the river, every second there is just below 7 cubic feet of water moving through that spot. So lots going in to our piece of data to calculate stream flow. These 3 main measurements are what we used to get this final number out at the end. So a little bit of averaging to start it, but then just following along with the formula and making sure I'm plugging in the right info every single step of the way. Always remembering to keep it at those 2 decimal places rounding to the hundredths. Go ahead and try out your practice flow rate calculation for number 2. So that next page has a whole new set of data. You can crunch the numbers and come out with a second average stream flow. Good luck.